Should all GP appointments be face-to-face? You know the number, 0207 862 2222. Get your calls in now. Let's find out more. Now, the numbers are pretty stark, to say the very least, but just a little bit of a display for you. It turns out that a third, 1 in 3, a third of all GP appointments in June were held over the phone or online. The highest proportion, that's the highest proportion since the pandemic. And then we come on to the next one. During the pandemic, as many as 4 in 10 appointments were held remotely. So nearly half. Now, telephone appointments. The percentage of telephone appointments has been stable for a few years, sticking at a quarter, 25% in June, this year, last year, and the year before. So no change there. But we have this. It's online consultations. Those are the ones that are actually driving the increase. And they accounted for just 1.5% of appointments in June 2023. But they were up to 8% in June of this year. Now, I'm joined now by GP Dr. Philippa Kay, and she's going to be answering us an important question about whether or not this is a good thing or a dangerous thing. We've had lots of calls on this one. Dr. Kay, would you rather see your patients in person or online? And the most important thing people really want to know is which is safer?
And the answer to all of those will always be, it depends.
Right.
So it depends on what the patient wants in the first instance, and then on what the patient might need. And those two things don't always match. But, you know, there are lots of things that are barriers to patients coming to see us. And actually, for many patients, an online consultation, be that a request, a follow-up question that we can communicate online, perhaps backed by a text message, your results were okay, you need to have a repeat or whatever it might be, for lots of people is really convenient and easy. But whenever I need to lay hands on you, if I need to examine you, of course you need to come in. And the number that I would really like to know, which doesn't seem to be out, is what number of online or telephone consultations are then converted to face-to-face? Because in my surgery, I might start the day with however many phone calls or online, but I will always have some that will still need to come and see me. What I worry about, though, is all the soft signs that we might not pick up, be that online or on the phone.
Just help us a little bit with about that. There's 2 questions. Firstly, you know, you might have an online consultation and say, look, come in and see me. If it is a worrying or there is an issue that's concerning you as a doctor, does that mean that that patient can get in quicker? Because as you know, it's very difficult sometimes to get an appointment with a GP.
Each practice will be set up slightly differently, but often it will be, actually, I need to examine you, or your child needs to be examined, or whatever it might be, and we will have slots at the end of the morning or afternoon surgery for that very conversion process. But what I worry about is the things that you might not tell me, but I might pick up if I see you face to face. Perhaps that's the interaction between a child or a parent or a spouse or a partner that makes me think there's something else going on here.
Can you give us sorry to interrupt you, it's just people at home will really be helped by this sort of thing. Just give us an example of what sort of thing you might notice as a doctor that perhaps isn't necessarily picked up when they're not in the room.
Somebody, for example, who's always silenced by a partner, somebody who feels a child who is dirty, who seems to flinch from their parent or their caregiver, who seems to be scared. Over the telephone, it's difficult to know sometimes, is your silence because the connection's gone down, or because you're thinking, or actually because you're really tearful. And so all those non-verbal forms of communication, that's what I worry about missing. And we have to be really, really clear about what we call safety netting, about the rules around when you must come back, you know, when you must present again. We have to be clear about that. That's always been in particular over the telephone.
That's very helpful, Philippa. I think a lot of people forget that GPs aren't just about prescribing medicines, but they are important first moments, first encounters where people notice, to say the least, abuse, loneliness, issues involving mental health, the stuff that isn't spoken about and often is hard to communicate online, which is what you're talking about. Thank you, Philippa, so much for being with us this morning. I'm going to go to a caller now in Surrey. David, look, do you want to see your GP face-to-face, or are you happy to do it via Zoom?
Well, I'm an example of this. I've had 6 months of undiagnosed back pain, and several times my friends have told me to go and book a GP appointment. You know, you phone up, can't get through, or your number, whatever, in the queue. So I just gave up in the end. And then because it's been going on so long, because my phone's been off the hook a bit, they're not playing up. And so I dropped a note off on last Saturday, and on Monday, yesterday, the GP phoned me back, "Oh, can you come in actually right now as I'm speaking?" Because I've got a meeting shortly, I'm due to see the doctor on Thursday. Now, I'm going to go in there and show exactly where the pain is and how I deal with it on a daily basis, which could not be done over the phone. And then because I have multiple other problems, they can look up my history and talk to me generally and then come to a diagnosis.
Well, it's terrible that you weren't, David, we wish you well, and it's terrible that you weren't able to see a doctor for that long. I mean, one of the reasons that having this consultation in place was to avoid the delays that you precisely have experienced. Angela, what do you make of this? You've got doctors in your family. Would you use an online consultation instead of going in?
Absolutely not. I think it's our right as taxpayers, it's our right as human beings to have that interaction. Not necessarily just because you need a physical examination. A lot of GP work is almost sort of holistic. You want to be able to speak to somebody. You know, if you alluded to things like mental health, these are very nuanced conditions, and you want to feel that you can talk to somebody. And the other thing that wasn't mentioned that I'm sure Philippa would be able to sort of concur with is there's that by the way moment, which doctor friends have said to me that as somebody's leaving the consultation, they've gone in principally with a sore throat, but actually there was something
other stuff emerges, often stuff that they're very fearful of talking about.
And they needed that kind of softener part first.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Radzi, what do you think? Angela says it's effectively a right as taxpayers to be able to see your GP face-to-face.
First of all, what a communicator Philippa is. That kind of actually made me reflect and think a lot. So thank you to her. What I would also say is just the nature of it being remote means that, for example, if you're an old person and you have mobility issues, well, that could possibly be a better situation. If, for example, paying for the bus or getting to the surgery, we may mention a little bit later on Scotland and the rural nature of that. If, for example, you're in the Hebrides, Isle of Lewis, Isle of Mull, whatever, getting to the doctor, it may not be nearby. So there are definitely benefits by having it remote. Although I think, in an ideal world, appointments face-to-face are key.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether Marion is in rural Suffolk or not. Marion, let me ask you, would you, if you can't get into your GP, be perfectly happy with a consultation online? Or do you think, as the panel seemed to, that it should be a right? Sorry, start again, Marion.
I don't like doing things online. I just half an hour ago now, finished a telephone appointment with my GP, which was ideal. It was to discuss the results of a blood test. He didn't need to examine me, so I could talk to him in the comfort of my own home. It's also, in my surgery, quicker to get a telephone appointment than it is to get face-to-face in the surgery.
Right, so Marion, it suits you. Thank you for calling in, Marion. I think what you're talking about is actually an important thing because it's about saving GP time. Now, had you gone into that surgery, that would have been a lot of time that was taking up dealing with things that, as you've just very helpfully described there, could be dealt with in one telephone call.
And also, Marion makes a really good point. In my head, online and a phone call is grouped into the same thing, whereas actually what Marion's pointing out is no, a phone call is a very different thing, much easier, much more accessible, much quicker. Totally agree.
But she also beg your pardon. She points out the fact that that was driven by the patient. That suited her. There are and if it suits you, absolutely, for all the points you made about geography. But if it doesn't, and you want that connection, remember GPs traditionally were part of the community. They were central to the communities in which we lived, and you want that ongoing relationship.
Well, let's just hear what Kathleen in Birmingham has to say about this. Kathleen?
Oh, hello panel.
Hello.
I think the one thing that we forgot to say is that if you need to be examined underneath, if you've got a lump on your breast, another thing that people don't think of, is that if you've got cellulitis in your leg, which can be affected by an open cut, you can't show your leg right up to the doctor and the doctor say, come in. You need to get attention then, because you can get all sorts of things. You can get very bad infections. So there are things like that. I've got Sjogren's, which means that I have got no tear ducts. I have got no saliva in my mouth.
Oh, how horrible.
And I'm also which is an autoimmune syndrome, which I am under the hospital here in Birmingham.
Yeah.
So you've got to think about things like that, because you can't, if you've got a very bad cut and you've got water leaking from your leg, the first thing you've got to do is either see a doctor or get yourself to an emergency.
I think that's a very helpful point, Kathleen. The point is that some conditions are totally unsuitable for anything other than an in-person consultation. And you make that point powerfully. But the question is, how do you get that appointment in the first place when GPs, frankly, in many cases are not seeing people because they're either so overwhelmed or because GP surgeries are closing down across the country? Thank you, Kathleen. After the break, we're taking more of your calls on whether GP... on to our public doctors, and especially more of your calls on whether all GP appointments should be face-to-face. A third of appointments were on the phone or online in June of this year. Now, the number is 0207 862 2222. That's the number you'll need. I'm going to go first to a caller from the great city of Manchester. David, should they all be face-to-face, or are you happy to be on the phone or online?
Ideally, I think it should be face-to-face. I've had a major health scare for the last 2 years, and I have never seen a GP. The only face-to-face I've had is a practice pharmacist. There don't seem many doctors around.
Well, David, sorry to interrupt. David, so forgive me. I don't mean to interrupt you. Your story is important. You say you've not seen a GP face-to-face. Have you been having appointments on the phone or online?
Not online, no. I had one call from the GP about an unrelated matter, but I'm a bit in the dark on how to go about it. The only doctor I saw was when I ended up in A&E. And
so do you have can I ask you, do you have a GP? Have you tried to get an appointment and they just simply won't see you? Or why haven't you been able to speak to your GP?
I've asked for an emergency some months ago, and I saw the practice pharmacist, once again, more or less prescribing drugs, diagnosing, under the belt of the GP afterwards. But that's how it seems to be. And what I have to do is basically keep the GP in the practice sweet.
Well, you shouldn't have to do that, but the question is whether or not you certainly should be able to have a telephone call at first, at the very least. You seems like you've had one. Listen, David, I don't know about your medical condition, but I hope you get onto it. And, frankly, I'd telephone that GP if I were you today and insist on a face-to-face appointment. You are, as Angela says, certainly entitled to one. Thanks for calling, David. It's a kind of horrifying story to say this. Paula, you're in Oxford. The question is, look, as more and more GPs are, closing down and it's becoming difficult to get a face-to-face appointment, is it okay to be consulted on the telephone or online, or should they all be face-to-face? What do you think, Paula?
I believe that they can be over the telephone. If the doctor then feels that he needs to see you, then obviously he can make that soon appointment to obviously get you to come into the GP service.
Yeah, that was the view of our doctor as well. But there were concerns that were raised about what might happen in certain circumstances where doctors miss things if the person's not in front of them. But thanks for calling, Paula. Diane in Coventry, do you always want to go and see your doctor face-to-face? Do you think that should be for everybody to do? Or do you think there is a place for telephone calls and especially online consultations?
Good morning. Well, I think there should be the opportunity for free. I couldn't do online.
Right.
I have had the odd phone call, but I prefer face-to-face because as the GP and Angela on your panel said, things could be missed.
Right. I think a lot of people are saying that to Diana. Beverly, you're in London. What do you think? You've heard what Diane's had to say about it, and Angela, things getting missed. You know, are you really comfortable in having a conversation with your doctor, not face to face? Also, there's a by the way moment, which is at the end of the conversation with a doctor when you're really worried about something. You've had a comfortable moment with or encounter with your care provider. You say, oh, by the way, I'm worried about something else. And that can often be the most important thing that needs to be dealt with. Or what do you think, Beverly?
No, I don't think a telephone conversation helping, especially the elderly people. Sometimes they want to explain about the rectum, the vagina, and you can't explain it that deep. But if they give you an examination, they can find out what's happening. And your illness can be cured quicker than telephone conversation. You're 10 in the queue, and then when they call you, sorry, there's no appointment.
It's very hard. I'm just going to give the last word to Radzi. What do you think of that? In that you said something very interesting about what sometimes happens in the room with the doctor. Thanks for calling, Beverly.
Yeah, I think the fact that you might otherwise be worried about possibly what your partner might think, or, for example, when I was a teenager, I don't really want my mum to be hearing possibly what I'm going to speak to a doctor about. So that face-to-face nature at least means that my mum or my partner might be precluded from that, just for that sense of privacy.
Well, thanks very much, Radzi, and thanks for calling all of your calls on this. You know, so many people with personal stories. Thank you, Beverly, for calling in. Later, we'll be asking whether